Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Hello and welcome to Health Oddity, episode 116. It's been a few weeks since I've been here. I've been away. So the guys have held the ship, held the fort. We've had some awesome guests. So I've got to go through those back catalogue of those great guests and listen to those podcasts myself. But here today, we've got the whole team, myself, Peter and James back behind the, what do we call it? Behind the reins, behind the steering wheel. And we've got another great guest lined up who I shall introduce you to in a minute. But it's been a while since I've seen the guys. So I'm intrigued to see how they are. Well, hello, Peter, waving at me. I'll start with you, Peter. How's life? What have you been up to?
It's all good. Happy birthday, by the way.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Any
happy returns and all that sort of stuff.
43. I know.
Yeah, I know.
I don't look at you. Don't tell me.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
You're listening to this though. It was Paul's birthday about 4 weeks ago.
Yeah, I know. This is
you'll be nearly 44 when this goes out.
Yeah, I do my once a year appearance on this podcast.
Yeah, it's your birthday.
Exactly.
Hello. Yeah.
So you been well, Peter?
Yeah, I'm all good. Yeah. Training was a bit ropey last week. Because I think I had COVID pretty much. But yeah, other than that, it's all.
But you still did it.
Sorry?
Still did it. You still did something.
I did some stuff, yeah, but not nearly, not as much as Paul had programmed for me, put it that way. It just wasn't happening. I had to go, and then it was like, nah, you know, but it's one of those things. But I used it as an example of like, you know, because people try and force their way through stuff and smash everything and all that. And it's like, no, just, you know, I did some stuff that I wouldn't have been able to do like 2 years ago, even on a heavy day, and it felt easy. So it was a good little way to see that I've definitely progressed, you know, good little check-in. So it was very nice.
Good. Okay. What about you, James? You're nodding your head approvingly.
Yeah, I'm just agreeing with Pete. No, very good. Yeah, we've got the tactical strength challenge coming up at the weekend at Unique Results. So we're hosting that. So we've got people coming from, I think, Colchester, from London, and Bracknell and around that kind of area for the weekend, for Saturday. So that's going to be good. So deadlift.
Are you taking part yourself?
No, hosting. Yeah. It's quite a big day to kind of host and organize and put it all together and stuff. Yeah. So deadlifts, pull-ups or flex arm hang and snatches. So we're hosting that on Saturday afternoon, which will be good. So looking forward to that. Yeah.
Brilliant. And your training going well?
It is. Yeah. Everything's going well. We're following the program. Training a bit later on today when I go back into work. So everything's good. Thank you, mate.
Great. Okay, so it brings me on to our guest today. Welcome, Adam. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thanks, fellas. Thanks for the invite. Looking forward to having a chat and getting to know you guys a bit better.
Yeah. So this is the first time we've met. We only just started talking about 10 minutes ago. So why don't I just do a very quick introduction to Adam? Adam, I came across Adam, and I'm sure a lot of people have come across Adam, who's super active on Instagram. And not only is he an expert in his field, he is also someone who is ready and willing, but also very capable of pulling out the truth and the and also the lies in the fitness industry, and trying to shed some light on on some of the charlatans out there, but also some of the best evidence-based training that there is and approaches to rehab and fitness. And he does it in a really exciting, engaging way. At times he can push people's buttons. Other times he's conciliatory, but also at the same time informative. And at every point, I would say informative. So welcome, Adam. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on here. Some of my clients know you. I've obviously joined your Instagram feed. Sports Physio, I think, is your Instagram handle, isn't it? So
well, I'm normally under my name, Adam Meakins, but my alter ego, which is like my brand name, is the Sports Physio.
The Sports Physio. So fantastic to have you on here. So some of our listeners will be very familiar with you, and they're probably following you on their Instagram, but for those of our listeners who've not maybe come across you and some of the things you say, kind of, where do you come from? Why did you set up this Instagram feed, and what kind of brings you to our attention now? And
well, my background is a little bit checkered, as most people's tends to be. You know, once you start living a few years on this planet, you tend to have a few stories. So I haven't always been a physiotherapist, which is my profession now, but I started off my career as a young man in the military. So I did a couple of years of service, and I had aspirations of staying in the service for all of my life. I had no interest in the health or fitness or scientific professions or industry at all. I was very much dedicated to wanting to become the best soldier I possibly can. I come from a military background, great-grandfather, grandfather, father, all served, and I very much wanted to do the same. But life got in the way, as things tend to do. So we won't go into that deep and dark story, but it was around a woman. Say no more. So I left the military after about 5 years and came out onto Civvy Street, not knowing what the fuck to do with myself. So that led me into health and fitness. So I was obviously the fittest I've been, thanks to the military. I enjoyed health and fitness. I enjoyed training. So I thought I'd use that as a job. So I went and did my first degree in sports science. So I did a Bachelor of Science in sports science and came out there with pretty much a useless degree. I found it was very hard to find a job that was going to pay me well and that I enjoyed. So I worked as a glorified personal trainer. No disrespect to personal trainers, but I was struggling to see a way forward in the, when was this, early 90s, mid 90s, to see a way to make a living out of this. So I thought I needed another string to my bow. And in these few gymnasiums that I was working as a sports scientist, strength and conditioning coach, I came across this profession called physiotherapy. And I thought I'll have a go at that. And that's pretty much how I got into physio. So in the early 2000s, I went in and did a second Bachelor of Science. So I got 2 degrees, one in sports science, one in physio, and came out and qualified as a physio, say in the early 2000s. And the rest is history. And throughout my career as a physiotherapist, I've come up across all sorts of nonsense and bullshit that I got suckered into, and then I started to realize and think a bit, hold on a minute, this doesn't sound quite right, read a bit more around it, do a bit more research, realize that I've been given a lot of bullshit in my training by my peers, by my supervisors, by my educators, which I was very angry and annoyed about. So I had a bit of a kickback about that. And as social media was kicking off, that's where I started to voice my angst and frustration. And that's where I got a bit of a reputation over the years as being this gobshite on social media who goes around critically slagging off everything and anything, especially in the world of physiotherapy, but I also do it in fitness and health as well, a little bit based on my past experiences there. So in a nutshell now, as I say, my role is still working the NHS as a physiotherapist. I'm now in a sort of specialized role. I do private consultations, mostly online. And I now moved a lot into the education field as well. So I'm teaching a lot of young physios to try and think critically and skeptically and be able to try to avoid all the problems that I went through as a young physio, falling for the dogma and the bullshit, and just trying to make them realize that things that they get taught, they have to unlearn or think differently about, which is no easy feat. So that's me in a not so small nutshell.
Where do you, sorry, go on, Peter, do you want to go?
I was going to say it's kind of a rite of passage, though, isn't it? In stuff. I mean, I say especially, but not necessarily especially, but in things like in exercise and, you know, becoming a trainer or becoming a physio or becoming like anybody in that sort of space. You trust the people who you're learning from, right? Because they've done it before you and you don't know anything, and then you're starting to learn. But then that's when you start to realize, you know, and it's one of the things. I mean, Dan John said this years ago, and he was kind of like, you've done this thing, so then that's the thing. And everyone, and then you tell everyone about that, and then you go and learn this thing, and then you go, actually, no, now this is the thing, and then you go and learn it, and then you go, now it's this thing. And actually, it's an amalgamation of the lot, isn't it? And you throw away what you don't need or want or don't need to use, and you disregard it, and you keep what you're aware of it, and you keep what works for particular people. So it's kind of a rite of passage. So how do you know, like, who to trust, who to learn from? You know what I mean? This is one of the things, but and this will be good for the listeners as well, so they can then know, you know, what am I seeing out there that is true, that isn't true, that I can trust, you know?
Well, I get asked this question a lot, and my simple answer is trust no fucker. Don't trust anybody. Have a critical, skeptical opinion of everybody and everything. And people think that's a negative way to go through life. And I say it isn't. It's a really good way to go through life. You know, it doesn't mean you're a nihilist. It doesn't mean you start, you know, refuting everything that everybody tells you. You're just skeptical. You're just going to hold that little bit of, you know, thought to yourself and think, okay, they might be right. They might also be wrong as well. So you just don't take anybody's word at face value. And that goes for me as well. So when people say, oh, I like what Adam says because Adam speaks the truth, I'm like, no, I don't. I speak my interpretation of what I think is true.
Yeah.
So don't trust me. Don't think that what I'm saying is gospel and 100% correct. I've made fucking many mistakes throughout my career. And I've made many mistakes on social media in presenting information that I thought was true and correct. And then someone's pointed out and said, you've misinterpreted that. You've got the wrong end of the stick. And I've gone, oh, fuck, so I have.
We spoke to a guy called...
That's just what happens. We're human beings. Nobody is perfect. Nobody's 100% all the right all the time. So as I say, don't trust everybody. But it doesn't mean you have to be a nihilist. You're just going to be skeptical and critical. And it's a good trait to have because it just stops you falling down these rabbit holes and just going down these pathways where there's no coming back.
Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, we spoke to a guy called Mark Bennett a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about this, and he said, like, you know, you can make decisions or Instagram posts or whatever it is with the information you have at the time and be right, but then be proven wrong like a couple of years down the line or something like that, or even, you know, a few weeks down the line when new information comes to light that you weren't necessarily aware of. So I like what you just said there is that, you know, you don't even have to listen to you because what you're saying at the time from your point of view is right to you, but it might not be to everybody. So
well, isn't one of the markers of a successful individual in terms of whatever discipline is that they have a methodology for questioning and understanding a process of evaluating information. And in a way, knowledge is not that you are set in stone in like, this is fact, this is not, it's like the scientific method is really the key thing. It's like, okay, how am I evaluating this information? It's like, I mean, you'll know, Adam, like Google, you can find anything, and your Instagram picks up a lot of those kind of crazy things that will pop into people's feeds. And it's like, okay, all of this information is at the same place. It's at a touch of a button. But what is good information? What is not? Unless you can evaluate it, then you're going to be in a situation where you'll think everything is of the same value. So when you're teaching your students, are you teaching them I mean, how do you teach them? Is it like fact driven, or is it approach driven and awareness driven? I mean, how do you do it?
So yeah, the way that I like to teach people to learn is to critically think, is to not just take facts and information and say just assume that is true and accurate, but actually armor them with the skills to be able to critically think and analyze the facts and the information they're getting, for them to be able to make that decision themselves. So rather than just listen to somebody say, this is true, that's wrong, that's bullshit, that's correct, actually to be able to get the information. And that's hard. The part of it is where to find it, where to get it, where to trust it from a reliable source, how to analyze it, how to realize whether there is good quality data there, whether there's good quality information, and how to work out whether there is a good effect, no effect, minimal effect with what we're doing. So yeah, I'm very much a keen believer of teaching people to think rather than just teaching people facts and information.
Given there's so much information around at the moment, what do you think is the state of the industry across health and wellness? So, I mean, I know that physiotherapy and personal training and a lot of different wellness strategies can kind of intersect. But I mean, given that we're 30 years, 40 years deep into the health and fitness industry, where do you think it stands at the moment?
Unfortunately, not much further than 30 or 40 years down the line, if I'm being brutally honest, in my opinion. We're still very much a guru-driven society. We still very much listen to these people that are considered accolades. They're considered, leaders in the field. And so they get put on these pedestals and everything they say just tends to be accepted. So I still see that as a societal factor rather than just, an individual profession. So I see it again in physiotherapy with our gurus in there who claim they've got all the special magical skills of fixing and healing things and pressing the right spot and giving the right corrective exercise. And these people know exactly what to do all the time and they get everybody better, which is just absolute bullshit. But unfortunately, a lot of people still follow them. They still believe it and they're like little disciples. And I see it again in nutrition. I see it in health and fitness. I see it in strength and condition. There's these people that are considered, as say, up there and everybody listens and obeys them. Now, again, I don't want to come across as too disparaging and say we shouldn't listen to experts, because I do think they have a role. So, there are people in all areas who I look up to as people I would consider as experts. I just don't take what they say as gospel. I just don't. There's no sacred cows for me anymore. There used to be, but I think now that I've got a bit grayer, I've got a bit older, I've got a bit wiser, I've been round the bush too many times, I've been sucker punched too many times. I've just realized now there are no sacred cows, there are no gurus. So there are people that I respect and considered experts, but I still sometimes don't agree with them. And I think that's perfectly fine to do. And it's good to do. I think disagreement drives progress. If everybody's nodding, who was it who said, I think it was Colonel Patton who said, if everybody's nodding along and agreeing, you're in the wrong fucking room. You need to go, if everybody can't disagree with you or isn't disagreeing with you, you're not thinking hard enough or something along those lines as well. Disagreement is great. People avoid it because it can be unpleasant and nasty. And it can be a bit, tit for tat, and it all starts devolving into slagging matches and ad hom attacks and stuff like that. But good quality disagreement around something fundamental, it's where I've learned most. So some of the people I've learned most over the last few years are people that I disagree with a lot. And again, it's just trying to find that way as a human being to be able to agree or not agree, but to discuss something with somebody you disagree with. And it isn't easy. And we don't get taught that. Again, unfortunately, the world is devolving into these little sects. We go into this very tribal mentality set. Are you with us or are you against us? Do you like this process or do you like that process? And it's just, for me, it's just crazy way of thinking, because both of these processes, both of these ways could have benefits and negatives. So as you said, take the best bits from both and ignore the not so good bits from both as well. Don't align yourself with any one way of doing stuff, because it's just, for me, silly.
How did you balance that with the army, where there is definitely a chain of command?
That's a completely. I had no critical thinking skills in the army.
Okay.
Well, I did and I didn't. But no, it's a different environment, in the military compared to in the civvy street. But there is still that common misconception that in the military you're just a mindless drone. I wasn't. I went to Sandhurst, so I did my officer training. So I came out as a junior officer, and I was very much taught you take orders. There's a chain of command. You follow that chain of command, but you're always thinking about it. You're always thinking, before I pass these orders that I've got down from my superior and I pass them on down the chain to my inferiors, is there going to be some serious consequences? And that is something I think is the biggest problem with a lot of physiotherapy and a lot of fitness, is that the consequences of bad decisions aren't that bad. So bad decisions happen a lot and there's no repercussions for them. Yet in something like the military, if you make a bad decision, there are some really fucking serious consequences. So people tend to stop and think a little bit more. And they sometimes, analyze and critically think, should I actually be doing this? Should I be following this? Perhaps I better go and speak to somebody else, see what they think. In our line of work, because these consequences aren't that bad, there are no real major, life-threatening risks for many things. Bad decisions just don't have those sort of repercussions. And so that's why I think a lot of bad decisions are made and carried on.
Because when we did have Mark on the other week, I think he was saying that, wasn't he? That actually in the military, to begin with, when you're going through basic training and things, you are very much, you are follow orders, do this, do that, make your bed, everything, we're checking your cupboards, all that sort of stuff. But as soon as you get to a certain level, you are then not just encouraged, but required to have critical thinking and to question, not question decisions that are made, but evaluate and give feedback and actually think for yourself a bit more, which is fantastic. In terms of because I know that you've obviously been doing this for 25 years now, Adam, and I think some of the stuff I saw recently from you, I quite like it actually, when you maybe are talking about, I think it was something like dry needling or something you were talking about recently, and someone came to you and said, oh, well, you don't know what you're talking about with this, and you kind of said, well, actually I did it myself for 2 or 3 years, and I was like you said, maybe you were a convert to it, but then you kind of critically thought about it, and maybe other information came to light that then made you look differently at it. So you're not someone who's just looking at things and picking holes in them or picking on them. You've actually lived 25 years doing this, so you've got a breadth of experience. Do you think that a lot of these sort of therapeutic modalities and methods and things, is there benefits to most of these things for certain people, do you think? Or are there some things that are just, not good for anyone, I suppose, because some people would say, well, actually everything has a place and something might work for some people and but not for others. But there are some things that you just think you just wouldn't do with anyone.
Yeah, that's a great question. And there is no yes or no, black or white answer. There's lots of nuance and shades of gray here. But the passive interventions that are often claimed to fix people and cure things that are causing pain and disability, they just don't do what a lot of people have been taught or led to believe that they do. So, take something like spinal manipulation, that clicking and popping of the joints. Originally, and there's still people who think this, I was taught that you're putting things back into alignment. You've got micro instabilities, things are slightly out of place, and you do these adjustments and you correct the alignment, and that relieves pain and puts everything back where it's supposed to be. But that's absolute bullshit. The only way you're going to get your spine out of alignment is if you have a spinal injury. If you get somebody with a baseball bat who comes around and gives you a spinal fracture, or you're in a road traffic accident, you get ejected from the car at 30 miles an hour and you flip across the road, that's how you put your spine out of alignment. And that's quite obviously noticeable because you've got some serious problems afterwards. You're not just walking around with some pain and some discomfort. But it's normally the narratives and the explanations around these treatments that I think are the problems, and they're the things that I think hold people back, and they cause more harm than benefit.
So you're saying that the actual exercises may have some value, but the way they are utilized in terms of the rationale behind them tends to be flawed. Yeah. Right. Okay.
Yeah. So again, normally, these interventions can help reduce sensations of pain. They can improve people's disability. It's just that there's a lot of uncertainty about how they do that and who they do it for and how long it works for and how effective it is. So again, this belief that, it's doing these so-called structural things, it's putting things back into place, it's correcting muscle imbalances, it's pre-activating these microsecond delays that we got in our transverse abdominis or our rotator cuff muscles. That was all the stuff that, as I say, I was taught, and that's still going on today with explanations, but it's absolutely nonsense. And again, there is a wide body of literature that just people are just unaware of, that discounts this, that shows that this just doesn't happen. But say people don't get taught it, and people are unaware of this sort of alternative evidence base out there. All they're seeing is the evidence that says, well, it seems to work, it helps people. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not saying it doesn't. It's just not doing what you think it does. And telling people these things, as I said, I think can be detrimental. Telling somebody they've got a spine out of place, the pelvis is unstable, their muscles are unbalanced, they've got a bit of weakness in this muscle that needs addressing, that shit can actually hold people back from progressing. The vast majority of people I see who have got pain, that pain should have gone months ago, if not even longer. And they've still got it because they have changed their behavior, they're acting differently based on some misinformation that somebody has told them. And actually, you just got to give people that advice and education that what they've been told isn't 100% accurate or correct. The information and the actions that they're doing because of that is what's now making their pain last longer than it should have been. And it's one of the things that frustrates me most in this job, because I just think I am wasting a lot of people are wasting a lot of time, energy and effort when things just naturally should be getting better on their own. But a lot of healthcare professionals are getting in the way of that. They're delaying people's natural history. And they normally do it because they've been told and informed bullshit by other people, or they're just trying to justify their existence in the world, and they're overcomplicated and overconflating things, and they're just getting in the way of natural history. And it drives me crazy, drives me potty. I say, the amount of people I see that have got pain for long periods, totally unnecessarily, just because of some stupid bit of ignorance and misinformation, is outstanding. And that's across all healthcare. You know, I work in a trauma and orthopedic department. I worked in private practice. I've worked in neurologically wards, worked with care of the elderly. It's across the board. It's just that a lot of healthcare actually gets in the way of people getting better by, I think, not very rarely is it malicious. Very rarely is there people doing it deliberately. There are some shysters out there, but most people are just ignorant about this natural history process that should be happening, and instead just make things worse.
I suppose I've got two. Sorry, go on, James. You want to go?
Sorry, I was just going to say, yeah, because I think, like you say, people have a lot of these sort of manipulations, you know, by people, and instantly they come out and they feel, oh God, I feel better, you know, I feel, but they have to go back kind of, you know, the next week and then the week after, and I did it myself for a long, not manipulations, but I had a kind of, like you say, back pain for a long time, and I was doing loads of foam rolling and stretching, and it kind of temporarily made me feel better. It kind of made me, but someone sort of said to me, I think you're doing too much of that stuff, because you just kind of temporarily making yourself feel better. So I intentionally stopped foam rolling. I know it's the right thing to do, but it's worked for me. Stop foam rolling, stop doing all the stretching and all the stuff I was spending ages doing, and just focused on training. And I deadlift most days now, and I get tight, and and my back pain has just gone, and I'm stronger than I've ever been. But it almost did. I was in that stage myself where it felt like I can't actually envisage a day without discomfort or pain, you know. And now that I'm through it after a long time, I think, God, there people live like that for years and years and years, don't they? You know, just kind of doing these little treatments and little things and little visits here and there, just to kind of make them feel better, you know.
They do, and I see them weekly in my clinic. You know, I see these people that have had pains like yourself, but not, you know. First of all, it's good to be way out of it, so well done for that. But you know, I see patients that have got, you know, chronic pain that have lasted 10, 15, 20 years. And they've got these beliefs ingrained deeply now, hardwired into them, you know, and that's very hard to turn around. And that's all just due to some well-intentioned healthcare professional saying and starting that chain of events off that's just led to this 15-year of chronic pain. And it's sad and it's depressing to hear. But I think the biggest thing that healthcare doesn't do very well is we just got to fucking normalize pain. And that's something that just drives me crazy, how healthcare professionals always think pain is bad. And they pass that on to the general population. Pain is a perfectly normal experience. It's fucking unpleasant. Nobody wants it. Of course they don't. But there's lots of other unpleasant sensations that we also have to experience: hunger, thirst, tiredness, fatigue, you know. Pain is just another unpleasant sensation. We've got to normalize it more. And healthcare professionals need to be better at normalizing it. And it's something that I've changed my practice in massively over the years. Is most of the time when people are coming to me with a pain that's worrying them, that they're concerned about, that they don't understand, normalize it for them. You know, well, I don't blame anybody for being worried about a pain that they don't understand. Perfectly okay. But I've got 25 years of working with pain. I know pain quite well. I know what is a good pain or good pain. I know what is an okay pain and what isn't an okay pain based on the presentation and the history of how it started, its signs and its symptoms, its ags and its eases, the patient's past medical history. You know, we can quite easily screen for serious and sinister symptoms. So again, when there's somebody has none of those things and it's a pain, normalize it for them, reassure them. And often tell them to give it time and carry on doing what you're doing.
I think that's one of the things.
That's not sexy enough for a lot of physios or doctors or healthcare professionals. So it just very rarely gets done. And it
is that because they want to have the answer and they want to be the expert and they want to fix the person or help the person fix themselves.
Absolutely. Not maliciously. It's just, again, goodwill and people just trying to help other people. You know, a lot of healthcare professionals are caring, empathetic people. They go into the business because they want to help other people. And they just get taught, or they start to think they've got to help people by doing things. You know, if you don't do something, if you don't intervene with something, then you're not helping somebody. You're not doing everything to the best of your ability. And I'm like, with all good intentions, you're probably actually doing the exact opposite of what you're trying to achieve. There's this fixer operator mentality in a lot of healthcare, rather than this guide, this reassurer, this sage, the advice that you give to people. That's where the benefit of good healthcare really kicks in.
That's brilliant, because I mean, you said you worked in a neurology department as well, and it's like, and I don't know loads about neurology, but I'm aware of it. And like you say about normalizing pain, people are in pain. Pain's a threat response to something that's happened to them. That could even be something that their brain has remembered happened to them years ago, and it hasn't actually happened, but their brain's processed and said, the last time you did that, this happened, so I'm going to make it hurt, whatever it is. So all the manipulations, all of the foam rolling, like James was saying, all of that doesn't change the fact that the memory is there. So is that kind of what you're talking about? Because that's how it fits in my head. And it's like, if the memory is there, your brain goes straight to that and says, that's a threat response, I'm going to create pain. And that's where kind of chronic pain can come from. And then that person's got that story going through their head constantly. So is that what you're talking about? You can kind of change that story, normalize it and say, look, it's fine. And if you do this, it'll probably hurt. But if you know why, then you can change that story. You can change your neurology, and then actually it realizes, your central nervous system then realizes that what you're doing is no longer a threat, because the tissue damage that you had or whatever it is healed, because it does within like 6 months, doesn't it? At the most.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, to try and answer that question again, as brief as I can, I probably won't be brief, so apologies to people listening.
That's all right.
But yeah, I mean, pain is not very well correlated to tissue status. So I think that's the first thing I've got to say. So we see a lot of people who have severe shitloads of pain and no real signs of tissue damage on scans or imaging. But then we also have the converse side of that. We also see people that have shitloads of structural tissue damage, but very little in the way of pain or no pain at all. So there's this very much disproportionate connection between the structure of your muscles, your bones, your ligaments, your nervous system, and all this sort of stuff, and your perceptions and sensations of pain. So that's one of the things we have to also try to, you know, inform and advise people about, that, you know, severe levels of pain don't automatically mean severe structural damage. You know, and a couple of analogies that I like to use for this is the paper cut. How many of you have had a paper cut? How fucking painful are paper cuts?
I like that. I like that. Or standing on Lego or a plug or something like that.
Yeah, a little bit of Lego or something like that.
Wait,
you know,
I'm going to be controversial here, because I know you're a controversial man. 4 blokes on here. It's worse than childbirth, isn't it?
Sorry, that's a definite way to lose all your female listeners.
I didn't mean that.
No,
but you know, tissue damage doesn't equal pain, and why people have ongoing pain is there's no simple answer. There's no one reason that fits everybody. So some people have ongoing pain after an injury or just something that's happened out of the blue, because they are constantly doing too much and resensitizing pain. So we call these pain endurers. They're endurance copers. So these are individuals that have got something that's sore and uncomfortable, and they just keep doing the thing that makes it sore and uncomfortable. And it may be that process that just keeps sensitizing and causing this false feedback loop to keep coming around in the nervous system, pain, sensitization, and it just doesn't get time to settle down. So this group, these endurance copers, are very much needed to be assessed and worked out to see whether they've got this sort of strategy, and they need to be advised to calm shit down. And often with this people, these discussions can be quite challenging to do, because they've got the mindset, they've got to carry on doing it, they've got to keep pushing through it. And you've got to say, well, just, you've tried that and it hasn't worked and it isn't working. It's just making things sore. So we've got to shut you down. We've got to give some time for this shit to calm down temporarily. And then we'll phase it back in a bit later on to see how it goes. So those are the endurance copers, but we also get with chronic pain, people that are what called avoidance copers. And these are people that avoid the painful situation or the task completely. And yet they've still got pain, even though they've tried to let shit calm down. And trying to let that calm down hasn't worked. They've still got the pain. They've still got the discomfort. So with these people, we take a completely different strategy. We expose them to the painful stimuluses. With the endurance copers, we ask them to avoid it. So now it's the definition of madness. I can't remember who said this, is trying to do the same thing time and time again and expect a different result. But this is just normally what happens with pain in a chronic situation with people. They just get themselves into these strategies of how to deal with it. And then they just carry on dealing with it. So they'll foam roll it, they'll rub it, they'll poke it, they'll try to do their various different things. And maybe all they're doing is just resensitizing the fucking thing. They're just constantly irritating the thing that just needs time to settle down. But then these avoiders are also, they're not foam rolling it, they're sitting on the sofa, they're reducing their activity levels, they're avoiding ranges of movement, and they're getting more and more pain, and they're getting their disabilities getting worse and worse and worse as well. And that isn't helping them. So we have to sometimes ask people to push through pain, but we also have to ask people sometimes to avoid pain based on the clinical assessment. And that's where the skill of a good therapist comes in. It's not with all the fucking hands, massage stuff. It's not with all the other interventions with the machines that go bing, bing, bing. It's listening to a patient. It's taking their history. It's really understanding what's going on in that background. It's having a bit of psychology. It's having some good communication skills to get somebody to believe and trust you that what you want them to do is the right thing to do. Because trying to convince somebody to push through something that's painful and sore to try and expose them to the stimulus that they're fearful of, they're avoiding, it's fucking hard work, really difficult to do. But then again, so is asking somebody to stop doing something that they think they've got to carry on doing, and all they're doing is sensitizing it as well. So the skill of a good physio is communication, listening, history taking. It's not in the dry needling, the acupuncture, or the corrective exercises. That stuff is superfluous, in my opinion.
But it's not surprising that.
Sorry, Paul, carry on.
Yeah, it's not surprising though, in a way, that people try to avoid pain. I mean, I find it in training, that people can't differentiate stimulus between effort levels, pain. Everything is painful because it's uncomfortable, and really everything we do is geared towards pleasure. I mean, when you think about spinal manipulations, massage, even acupuncture and things, things that are like a complementary therapies tend to be quite enjoyable in comparison to deadlifting every day, 3 times a week, or pushing yourself to so that your heart rate is kind of challenged. And so, I mean, I just put a post on my Facebook group with my clients. It's just like, how do we differentiate the difference between uncomfortable and painful and threat and something that's just, effort? Because in modern society, we're not really surrounded by anything that's challenging, are we? I mean, we are. I mean, don't get me wrong, people are challenged throughout life, but everything we do is try to soften that. And we're not surrounded by people dying of consumption and people struggling on the breadline in the same way that we were maybe 300 years ago. And so it's not surprising that these industries come in. I mean, you're from the you work both private and NHS, don't you? Yeah, and yeah. I'd be interested to get your thoughts on, I mean, you're going to upset a lot of, whenever you put a post up, there's whole industries built around some of the things that you debunk, and they're not going to be happy. I mean, we know how litigious chiropractic is in America, for example. That these things, this whole industry
in the UK as well.
Is it the same? Yeah. So, but at the same time, like in the NHS, I can see how the money's not going to be spent on things that don't work. I mean, how are you balancing both the private enterprise, which could be making money from these complementary things, versus the actual things that work? And how do you balance that in your own business?
It's a great question, and it's a dilemma that I think every conscientious, ethical healthcare professional, and even probably fitness trainers, go through. How far down the bullshit ladder do I go to try and pay my mortgage and keep my lights on? And I totally understand that, and I totally get it. The problem is being an evidence-based healthcare professional, fitness practitioner doesn't pay very well. And the financial side of things is the biggest driver, is the biggest motivator for action. So, people do things based on financial reasons, and I totally understand that, and I empathize with that. I think it's just a matter of how far down this bullshit ladder you're prepared to go. And I think there are some people that are in the bottom. They're in the cesspit of it. You know, they're selling all sorts of stupid quackery and bullshit and gimmicks and gadgets and balls with little knobbly bits on that mark up at 500%. And they're driving around in a couple of cars and got a nice house. You know, that's the cesspit of the bullshit ladder. And then you've got the pious ones that are sitting at the top of this, you know, very evidence-based, squeaky clean, but they're probably not that around for long because they can't afford to keep the lights on in the place that they work at, and they can't carry on surviving. And so they tend to fade away quickly, and they find other professions and other jobs to go into. And then, you know, trying to find that balance in the middle ground is where I try to be. I try to find that bit where I'm here to, you know, support, help, educate people with their pains and problems, but not sell them bullshit, not sell them gadgets and gimmicks and gizmos. So the way that I've managed to navigate this in private practice is that I rehab the fuck out of people on a regular basis. I don't rub the fuck out of people. I don't manipulate the fuck out of people. I don't use acupuncture 12 sessions over a course of 3 months. I work with people that want to get better, that are prepared to engage in a course of action that is active. And I now align myself as a physiotherapist much more as a personal trainer, because when clients come to see personal trainers, they normally are quite prepared to have this mindset of 6 months worth of work before I start to see results, hopefully. But in healthcare, it's normally, I want you to come in and fix me within the next 2-3 weeks, please. So physios feel, and healthcare professionals feel, they've got this very short period of time with patients, and they've got to wring them dry for everything they can. And that's where bad practice comes in. So I tell therapists, change your mindset. Try to get your clients to come in for a longer duration and work on changing lifestyle, behavior, activity levels, all that sort of stuff. That's where the magic can happen. That's where you can earn a good income and a good living. You develop good relationships, networks will build, word of mouth will build, everything starts to fall into place. And that's how my practice has evolved massively over the last sort of decade.
So this is one of the things that I find interesting, actually, because I heard there's a guy who I know who's a therapist, and it wasn't him who said it. It was he's the guy who he works with. It said he actually discharges patients. How many therapists do that? Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Because patients end up discharging themselves, don't they? Because they'll just go, I've been coming for too long. It's either working or not working or whatever. I'm off. Yeah, but he actually he does exactly what you've just said, and he works with them. He gets the lifestyle, and he understands that. And he's like, right, so he can figure out here's what you're doing that may or may not be causing it, or what you're not doing that may be, or whatever. And they build that picture, and they get a plan, and they go through it. And all of that, kind of like training, like you've just said. And then at the end of it, he's like, right, you don't need me anymore. Off you go. And I think that's brilliant, because that's where what you're talking about. That's the ethical approach, isn't it? You don't need to go and see someone for years, because pain, if it's not in the tissue, not if it's not in the tissue, it's not in the tissue. And if the tissue's healed, it's something else, isn't it? So
absolutely. It's a great way of thinking.
Discharge patients?
Yeah, it's a great way of thinking, of working out an end point and a plan. This is where you are, this is where you need to be, and this is how we're going to get you there, and this is how long I think it's going to take. That should be done on the initial assessment with every patient. You know, it can adapt, it can change based on, you know, things that come out of the blue and different situations that occur. So there's got to be flexibility and adaptability in that. But yeah, I think, you know, that a good healthcare clinician should be making themselves unemployed with every patient they see, when they think it's suitable, and when the patient feels like they're able to carry on independently without their assistance.
Reality is you have a waiting list that way. You'll have a waiting list that way.
Exactly right. I mean, I'm not quite a fan of discharge. What I like to do is get people onto a position where they feel they're able to self-manage and they don't need to come back, but they're always welcome to come back.
Yeah.
So I always have an open door policy, but I always say to patients, right, looks like everything's gone where it needs to be. You're doing what you need to be. You've got minimal problems now. You've got things well under control. You've got a plan of action. There you go. We won't book anything further in. Long may I not have to see you again, in the nicest possible way.
In a good way.
The nicest possible way. But, you know, should the situation arise, should anything happen, please. I think people get a bit panicky, especially with health problems, is that when they think the door's closed, what happens if it comes back again? you know. And again, the part of what we should be doing is giving people strategies to know what to do if it does come back again. But there's always that little bit of anxiety when, you know, they're discharged. They think, oh my God, that's it. I'm left to my own devices now. So keeping that little bit of an open door policy, I think, just allows them to relax a bit. But they don't have to have that formal, you know, coming back in every time. Yeah.
And I suppose they may also feel if you've discharged them and then say 6 months down the line, for whatever reason, the problem comes back or a slightly different problem comes back, they may feel in a way that they've, you know, failed, or they may feel a bit awkward coming back to you after you've, whereas if you've had that sort of that open, honest conversation and made it clear that the doors are open if they need you again for the same issue or for a different issue, you know, then there's
I find it really flattering when a patient that I saw 5-6 years ago comes back and said, you did, you know, I've really enjoyed our time together, you did such a good job, but I've now got this other issue, would you mind having a look at it? I find that really flattering. So that for me means that I'm doing something right if people want to come back and see me a second time about something else.
So what would you say, in your opinion, what would you say somebody should be looking for in a consultation? So if they come to see somebody and then they're like, all right, just jump on the bench and I'll have a look, and then say click click click, right, off you go, you feel better, and then see you next week, and then blah blah blah, or, you know, like, or a sit down and not even do anything manual or any sort of therapy or anything, and just be like, right, what's your lifestyle look like? What, like, those are the two kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. So what would you say somebody should look for in a consultation?
That is a great question. And so, you know, to answer it, as again, there's going to be obviously a little bit of, again, nuance there based on what the problem is and what the setting is and everything along those lines. But basically, the first time you go to see a physiotherapist, the physio should spend a considerable amount of time getting to know you and the problem that you're wanting to discuss. So there should be a lot of talking initially, which again sometimes confuses a lot of patients because they're not used to it. They're expecting, you know, to be assessed by having a physical examination and being poked and prodded around. That is part of the assessment, and that still needs to happen. But actually, it's the listening, it's the talking, it's the history taking, it's listening to what works before, what hasn't worked before, what the patterns are, etc., past medical histories, all this sort of other stuff, lifestyle factors. This is where 80 to 90% of the information that helps us build a diagnosis comes from. It's the physical assessment is still important to do. You know, we'll ask you to move it. We'll have a look at it to make sure it's not swollen. There's not bits sticking out where it shouldn't be. You know, we'll check range of movement. We'll check muscle power. We'll do neurological examinations, make sure there's nothing going on there as well. That's all part of a good assessment. But it only probably gives us, to say, 10 to 20% of the diagnosis. It basically confirms what we already know based on what you've already told us. So again, a good initial assessment with a physiotherapist is going through that history taking, that talking about the problems and where it's come on, how long it's been going for, a little bit, again, diving into the background, asking some questions that you might think, why the bloody hell is he asking me this for? So, you know, I do a quick SNAPS assessment with every patient I see, which is just a little lifestyle checklist that I go through: smoking, nutrition, alcohol, physical activity, stress and sleep. And a lot of people say, why is this guy asking me about my stress levels when I've come in to talk about my back pain? Or why is he asking me about smoking when I've got a shoulder that's sore? But, you know, so those questions can be a bit strange. But again, I like to make sure that when I do see somebody new for the first time, I explain that before I ask it. I often say to them, thank you for coming to see me. My name's Adam. This is the plan of what we're going to be doing today, particularly if they've never had physiotherapy with me before. You know, I find giving people that little bit of pre-information before you start spending 45, 60 minutes with them, you know, actually helps them relax a bit, makes them understand what's going to happen, and helps build a connection and relationship. And that's the other thing you should expect from your first initial assessment, is to be able to feel relaxed. And you should be able to feel like you can discuss with this person truthfully and honestly about whatever you want to. You want to feel that this clinician is actually keen to listen to what you've got to say, and wants to try to genuinely get to know what's going on and get to know you and try to help you out. If you've got any, you know, cold shoulder feelings, you've got that little bit of, you know, this guy just wants me for the money, he wants me in and out, he's pushing me to answer questions that I don't want to ask, you're in the wrong place. So, you know, it should be a good relationship. It should be a relaxing environment. As I know it's a bit stressful because you're normally going in with pain and problems, but it wants to be as relaxing or as uncomfortable or unawkward as possible. And as I say, get to know that person. And then you should expect a good physical examination. You should have your clinician inspect the area of concern for you. So they should be able to ask you to visually inspect it. They should be able to poke it and press it, because palpation can give us some useful information. How sensitive it is there redness, is there heat, is there swelling? They'll do some basic movement tests. They'll do some basic resisted tests, stress testing. They may ask you to move in weird and awkward positions to see if that stimulates any sensations of pain as well. They may get the old reflex hammers out and tap you with that as well, just to make sure everything's firing the way it needs to be, if they think that's possibly a consideration. And then once they've done all that, then what they should do right at the end of this assessment is sit you down and clearly explain what they think is going on. Now, there may be some uncertainty in that. They may say, okay, we haven't got a clear diagnosis of what's definitely causing your pain, but they may give you a list of differential suspicions. They may say it could be X, Y, or Z, but the good news is that X, Y, and Z are managed pretty much the same. This is what I suggest we think we should do. The other thing they should also do is exclude any serious conditions or sinister conditions to the best of their ability as well, and reassure you with a diagnosis of exclusion. So I think it might be X, Y, or Z, but what I can say, it's definitely not A, B, or C. So it's not cancer. It doesn't look like there's anything sitting where it's not supposed to be. It doesn't look like there's a raging infection. So those, bits of information are really useful. So you should get some understanding of what's been going on, what your problem is, and you should get a rough plan on your first session about what's going to happen, how long it's possibly going to take, what the prognosis is, and how we're going to manage this over the next couple of months or so.
You see, from a personal trainer's point of view, I mean, that's exactly what you should be looking at from a health professional with a medical background. But I work us three, we all train our clients. We have businesses with trained clients. And there isn't that kind of professionalism in our industry in the way that there is with you. There's not the same kind of, there's not professional societies in the same way. There's not medical institutions that govern us. And therefore, often people say, well, the clients are with me because of my winning personality or whatever. And I smile nice, or I look great. Look great is a lot of what, I mean, I know I do, but guys, but when do you refer out to personal trainers, or what do you suggest that people do? Because once you've got them out of pain, you've given them some confidence that actually they can use their body as it's meant to, which is to put some performance on there, which is really my job, is to get someone to a different level of performance. What are you suggesting that they look for in trainers, and what do you think trainers need to be doing in order to be the best kind of for their clients?
That's a great question. Again, I just want to make something clear that what I've explained should happen in a physiotherapy appointment doesn't happen often in a physiotherapy appointment.
Yeah, that's the ideal, isn't it? I was going to say, Adam, that's
why I asked the question, because it was because obviously for the listener, that's what to look out for, isn't it?
Yeah.
But
I'd say out of every probably 10 physio appointments, probably one of those, so I'll probably say about 10% of physio appointments are structured that way and have that sort of ethos. Other times it's very much you're in there for 10 minutes, you get your clothes off, somebody pushes in something and says, this is the problem, and then just sends you on your way. I'll book you in next week. So yeah, that is the ideal situation of what should happen. Doesn't often happen. But going back to that other question, should we refer out? Absolutely. Again, one of the problems I think a lot of healthcare has is it works in silos. We tend to be very protective of our own little niches, and therefore we tend to not feel confident or secure enough to get other people on board to help us out. And I think that's a massive failing. It can get a bit confusing if you have too many people in. There's that old saying, you get too many chefs, it spoils the broth. So you don't want every coming in giving you their advice and opinions from every different field, but you do want, where appropriate, you do want some people to help you out now and again based on the situation. So, I work with nutritionists, I work with psychologists, I work with GPs, I work with surgeons, I work with personal trainers, I work with strength and conditioning coaches. I mean, I'm a little bit different because of my previous background. I class myself as a personal trainer. So if somebody wants to carry on and they're better and they don't need me as a physio, I'm quite happy to take them under my wing and do personal training with them and work them out programs and do online catch-ups and meet-ups with them as well. So I'm quite happy to do that myself. But if you're a physio and you're not, then yeah, absolutely, find a good PT, find a good strength coach that you work with, and refer out as and when needed, because I think that's essential. And the reverse should happen the other way around. You know, strength coaches, personal trainers should feel comfortable and confident to say, this person's got a bit of pain, they've told me something I'm not quite happy about, I'm uncertain about this, with so-and-so, and just make sure it's all okay and get it checked out.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, that's the way we at my gym, we've got a physio in-house, and he's very good, actually. He kind of has more of an approach that you're talking about, where he's not into the actual the kind of the therapeutic interventions and spending a lot of time on the couch. He really wants to get people moving and in the gym as soon as possible. And he's got his therapy room, and then we've got the training space, but as well, we can also he can pass people to us, we can pass people to him. He's got a good relationship with the members. So if, like you say, there's a slight issue, we can say, oh, can this person just talk to you for 10 minutes and have a chat? And so it works very well like that. And I was going to congratulate you on episode 116. That's the first time we've had the C-bomb dropped.
We got this far.
Yeah.
Is there a prize?
So this episode has got rid of all your female listeners and anybody who doesn't.
We'll have to see if Pete's got the.
Great,
can you somehow bleep that out, Pete?
I don't know. I'll see.
Okay.
No, I mean, one of the questions, I've got two questions really, and I'm aware of the time, so I don't want to keep you all day because I know you're a busy man. But a lot of what happens in performance, it doesn't always happen with any kind of peer review. So when you're looking at like performance, where you see what athletic coaches are doing on the field to try and push their athletes forwards, there's a lot of people who are coming up with things that have never been tested before. And really the proof of the pudding is always whether or not their athletes win games, win medals, things like that. And knowing that peer-reviewed papers can often be with a particular group of 20-something-year-old men, or with certain cohorts, or 20 years behind, or not covering all areas. Where is that balance between the person who wants to be the out of the box thinker, who's pushing the industry forwards and pushing their athletes to performance, versus what's happening in the universities in the clinical setting, where there can be more control? How do you balance that in your own interpretation of those of that data? Yeah,
so clinical anecdotes, clinical observations, what you see happening in the gym, new ideas, innovation wants to be encouraged. I'm a big believer of, say, that's where, people come up with ideas, they fuck about a bit and they find out things. And sometimes that's really good and that's really useful. So, if you have fucked about with something and you found something that seems to be really effective, great. All you've got to be aware of is that there's lots of uncertainty about that fucking around, how it's actually achieved what it has achieved. There's lots of alternative hypotheses. So you may think it's done something specific when there may be another factor that's non-specific that's achieved the same outcome. So the only way of knowing that is where science and research comes in. So if you fucked around and you found, let's say you've done an exercise that nobody else has come up with before, and you're starting to see great results on the field because of this new exercise you've implemented. Great, okay, the results are going up. You think it's this new exercise that's been done. You've got some anecdotal clinical observations that shows it's looking good. So what you need to do now is run a scientific controlled trial where you run groups of people with this exercise or without this exercise in similar conditions, in similar populations, to see whether this effect is actually truly happening because of what you think is happening. Or is there some other reason that is causing people to have an improved outcome other than you just doing this new exercise? So basically, there should be this pattern of action that happens. A new ideas came up, a new method, a new theory, then it goes into the scientific process, the research process of being controlled and looked at in studies, in research. And then basically after that, it allows us to decide whether this innovative procedure exercise is actually good to carry on doing, or whether there is other non-specific factors there that means that we can't say it's doing what we thought it's doing, but it's still useful, or whether there is clearly something there specific which says we should be doing this with this type of population now for the rest of the duration. So, the classic one I can use is the Nordic hamstring exercise. So the Nordic hamstring exercise has been shown to be really, really effective at reducing hamstring strains. And that was because somebody was fucking about with it in football. And they realized they got people to do Nordic hamstring curls and rates of hamstring injury dropped down. And they're like, oh, fucking hell, that's good. Let's put it to some scientific tests. Let's see what happens when we run people through Nordic hamstring exercises versus people that don't do Nordic hamstring exercises. They're going to do another form of hamstring exercise. And we're going to see whether, if they're doing hamstring curls versus the Nordics, do the Nordics have superiority at reducing hamstring injuries in football players? And yes, it did. So there we found a specific effect with the Nordic hamstring exercise on reducing hamstring injuries in football players. Now, they've tried to do it in other populations, in other areas, and they didn't see quite the same effect. So again, we sometimes see it working very well in some particular populations, but not so much in other populations. So we also can't extrapolate quite a lot from, or as a lot as I think a lot of people do. So a lot of research, as you said, is controlled into certain populations, and that tells us how it works for that population. It doesn't tell us how it works for Mrs. Meakins living down on 22 Acacia Street. It works well for the 21-year-old jacked jock, but does it have the same effect for somebody else? Probably not.
I suppose it's like a lot of our industry and actually the medical industry, it's like making food. You don't just use one ingredient. You don't just use onions. You use a complete kind of range of different ingredients to make a soup or make whatever you're doing. And it's the same when it comes to training someone, whether both for rehab, for athletic pursuits. There are lots of interactions there, which makes, I suppose, that complexity. Like, you don't just do deadlifts. You do deadlifts perhaps with squats, and then you have different rep ranges and different weights and different cycles, etc. And it becomes much more difficult to test the efficacy of that on individuals, maybe over populations. But it also provides space for, again, your kind of Instagram feed, the charlatan. Because where there is the ambiguity, that's where that kind of, I suppose you can't test it, can you? You can't test whether one person's personal training program for that person is going to be the best in the world versus something else, because the exercise selection is different, the order's different, the rep ranges, the adaptations of the individuals, and that makes it kind of a complex thing beyond just the exercise itself, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's so many confounding variables that affect, many things in our field of research. It's not like doing research in a petri dish where you're playing around with a microbe and an antibiotic. That's a controlled environment. You've got no other confounding variables. Does this antibiotic kill this microbe? And you've got nothing else around it that's going to possibly interfere with how that antibiotic works. When we are saying, does this exercise help this person get stronger, better, more flexible, whatever, there's all these other confounding variables that could also contribute to that person getting a result or not getting a result. So that's where the uncertainty comes in. So again, going back to the Nordic hamstring curl for reducing football injuries, we were thinking, it's because their hamstrings strengthened up, because we saw their rates of obviously eccentric hamstring torque increase significantly after doing this for a couple of months. But the other theory is it just makes people more confident with their hamstrings, because doing Nordic hamstrings gives you an increased sensation that your hamstrings are just going to pop. And it could be just that exposure through those sensations actually could also be a reason why we see reduced hamstring rates, because people just feel more confident in those sensations in their hamstrings now.
Yeah.
Does that mean like you say from a central nervous system level, it allows you your hamstrings a bit more? Because otherwise, if you did get that sensation, it would tighten it up and then go pop. And it goes,
could be graded exposure.
It's fine.
Yeah. So it could have nothing to do with the increase in strength. It could be just this exposure to a sensation that you've become more accustomed and used to, which has then allowed your body to adjust and adapt to the sensation when it's going to happen in another situation.
That's just reminded me of what Paul McElroy says about strength. Strength isn't built. It's granted by your central nervous system.
Yeah. We think that strength is just based on how your muscles can produce force, but you've got to remember, you've got to be willing to make your muscle produce force. So you've got to be, it's a display of strength. It requires the equipment. You need the equipment, but it's whether you're actually going to use that equipment to its full potential. And there's lots of reasons that can sometimes mean that you do or don't. You're fatigued, you're tired, you're fucked off, you can't be asked, you're going to put half effort in. So you can have all the equipment to produce X amount of force, but you just don't utilize it.
Okay, I wanted to play with finish off the chat with bullshit bingo. Okay, I'm just doing it for this episode.
Yeah, this isn't a new feature.
I wanted to throw out a few things and just get your thoughts on them.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. This is no, but really,
he looks like he's well up for this. If you're not watching, he's like going, "Oh God, where's this going?"
Okay, so yeah, what about acupuncture?
Yeah, mostly silly bullshit. It creates a stimulus to reduce the sensation of another stimulus. It doesn't matter where you put it, doesn't matter how you do it, doesn't matter whether you use toothpicks or needles. It has a similar effect, and it's a very small effect, so it's probably no more than a placebo, and it won't last for long. So for most of the time, it's silly bullshit.
Okay, one leg longer than the other.
95% of the population have one leg that's between a centimeter and a centimeter and a half different in leg length difference. So that's silly bullshit. It's normal to be asymmetrical.
Okay, unilateral training, doing stuff that's off center.
Okay, this is the one that's going to probably divide me a little bit. So I think it has some positive benefits in some situations, but again, it's overconflated and over exaggerated in what it can do and how it should be used.
Okay, great. So there's three kind of disciplines that people get mixed up with a bit: osteopathy, chiropractic, and physiotherapy. What should someone choose? Which one is the one that's? How should they differentiate?
Physio, obviously, because I'm biased and I'm a physio. Best profession ever going.
What has physio got over the others?
It hasn't got anything over the others. So all three of these are professions that help people with musculoskeletal pain and disability. So if you've got a problem with back pain, knee pain, tendon pain, muscle pain, shoulder pain, whatever, all three of these professions should be trained and equipped to help assess and manage that. There's lots of different ways and opinions and theories as to how they do that based on their training and the ethos and the culture within these different professions. So historically, physiotherapists come from remedial gymnasts, which were formed back during the Napoleonic Wars. So these were people that were helping people after war injuries to get moving again with their disabilities from war wounds. So physiotherapy comes from that sort of background. Osteopaths are an offshoot of chiropractic treatment, and chiropractic treatment come from some quack in the US called D.D. Palmer, who came up with the idea that all bones are out of alignment, and if you put them into a perfect alignment, you reduce the interference on the nervous system, and that corrects everything. So osteopathy and chiropractic have a lot more of a bullshit sort of pseudo-scientific approach, but they have moved away from it, a lot of them. But unfortunately, you do see a lot more silly quackery in those two professions because of their ethos and their training and their background than you do physiotherapy. But I have seen some excellent chiros, evidence-based, that will put most physios to shame. And I still see a lot of physios that are ignorant and are falling for the silly bullshit as well.
Okay, foam rolling.
90% silly bullshit. If it feels like it makes something feel a bit looser afterwards, then crack yourself out and roll around on it. If you're doing it 20 minutes before every session, you think it's needed and essential, you are unfortunately not using it probably the best way. Okay,
myofascial release.
Simple put, it's silly terminology because you can't release the myofascia. The myofascia is so strong and dense to hold us together. It's required to do it is you can't actually release it physically, and you can't actually affect it directly. So you can infect it indirectly by obviously rubbing through the skin, but the fascia lies under the skin. So the first thing that we could be interacting with when we do our massage is the skin, which has got a lot of nerve endings, a lot of blood vessels, a lot of proprioceptive stuff in there. So myofascial release, as I say, isn't actually releasing the fascia, and it's not working specifically on the fascia.
Okay, cold therapy. Icing a joint.
It has some benefits for reducing sensations of pain for short periods of time. There is a little bit of science now that says it may actually have a detrimental effect on healing processes. So if you're using it too much, too regularly, it could delay the healing process by impeding the natural inflammatory processes that we need. but it's a small, tiny effect. So for most people, they're hardly going to notice it. And of all the things I think people need to abandon for helping people with pain, using a bit of ice or cold therapy now and again is very low down on the list. You know, if I'm going to help someone feel a little bit less pain, I'm going to say, try an ice pack, 20 minutes, see if it makes it feel a bit better afterwards, before I'm going to start telling them to stop taking or stop doing other shit.
Okay, two more. I'm going to two more because I'll keep you here all day otherwise. NSAID, so pain relief, ibuprofen.
Used a lot, yeah, used a lot too often, a lot too regularly, and the side effects and the risks are very much downplayed. So there are some pretty adverse side effects that are not often discussed with people when they take non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, particularly for long periods of time. So it can have some detrimental effects to gastrointestinal health. It can also have a higher risk for heart and stroke type problems afterwards as well for certain populations. And that's not something that, again, is well discussed with people that are on it for long periods of time. The other thing is they're used too quickly in acute injuries. So inflammation gets a bad reputation, and trying to use an anti-inflammatory to reduce inflammation is considered to be a good thing. And I'm like, no. You want your inflammation to go through the natural healing processes in this situation of acute injury. So don't try to take anti-inflammatories too soon, particularly if you've had surgery, you know, and the surgeon stuck two pieces of bone together or two pieces of tendon together. You want the inflammation around there to actually do what it needs to do, which is start the process of remodeling and healing those tissues to knit together. So don't use them too quickly in acute injuries or post-surgery.
Great. And then the last one, which I know you've covered on your Instagram, spinal flexion in lifting.
We could be here for another hour now talking about that. Wow, what a one to finish off on. Yeah, simply put, again, there are lots of fears, unnecessary fears and silly bullshit around doing things with a flex spine. Our spines are designed to flex. They are designed to flex under loads, under positions of awkwardness, and be able to tolerate that. I think we've developed a society for probably over 100 years that's been avoidant of spinal flexion since the Victorian times. Sit up straight, don't bend through your back, bend through your knees, health and safety training. And it has probably made the population less tolerant to spinal flexion generally. So I think, you know, we're seeing increased rates, huge increase in rates in back pain, because I don't think we're using the spines the way they should be used. So I'm a big believer of getting people to use their spine by flexion, by underloads, but it does have to be sensible. It does have to be progressed sensibly, like you would do with any other exercise or any other activity. So again, we don't want to go let the pendulum swing too far and say all spinal flexion in all situations under all loads is perfectly okay to do. Fuck it, don't worry about it, just go and do it. Because I think that could end up problematic. But I do think to say that as a society, we've become very spinal flexion avoidant because of, say, Victorian times, health and safety training, bullshit on the internet, gurus telling us it's risky and dangerous. It isn't.
Yeah, no, it's something I get a lot of the time because I do kettlebell sport, and you're in this flex position with the kettlebells in the rack, and people are saying that must be awful for your back, but actually it feels pretty good. Yeah. And I know a lot of the Russians think that when you're swinging with a flex spine, you get some good kind of stretching, you know, and I don't know if that's the case, but that's what they believe anyway. But no, it's interesting to hear that. So, okay, that was bullshit bingo. Just especially for you, Adam.
More of that next week.
Was that a full house? Did I get the house? Did I get a full house?
Yeah, full house. Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, I mean, look, it's amazing having you on. It's great to have a chance to speak because we watch your videos, and you know, we listen to you, and times we might agree or disagree, and but actually listening to the way you're articulating a lot of these ideas and the kind of methodology behind the videos, you can see that you're just thinking very deeply in a way that a lot of people, as you said, aren't within the industry. They are just taking things at face value, or they are regurgitating stuff because it makes them money. And yeah, of course, it's a fine balance. But look, it's been absolutely amazing. I was just wondering if there's anything that people need to know about you, if they want to contact you, or how you work, whether you're taking on private patients or whether or not you just want people to stay away. It's up to you.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I was about to say. People are more than welcome to contact me if they've enjoyed what I've had to say. If they haven't enjoyed what I have to say, then they can fuck off. No, I'm joking. I'm across all social media platforms, and I do try to respond to as many messages as I can. But nowadays, it's getting harder and harder with the amount that I do get. But I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all the usual social media platforms. I've got a website. If people want to go and find out a bit more about that, they can go to that as well. So that's the sports.physio, and I run a couple of educational courses there. And I'm also running what's called the Better Clinician Project with a colleague of mine, which is an online education platform for all clinicians, not just physios, but sports therapists, sports scientists. We've got a few PTs on there as well, where each month we just sort of pick a topic: back pain, rotator cuff disease, disc herniations, lateral ankle sprains, and we break it down by looking at the evidence and the research, and we just do it in a very sort of non-formal way, because one thing I am a big fan of is, say, continuing education is dull as fucking ditch water. So we try to add a little bit of personality into it, keep it short and sweet, focus on the key things that are important to focus on, try to ignore all the superfluous bullshit around the edges, and just try to get people to be more aware of various different pathologies and problems in the clinical world. So that's the Better Clinician Project, and that's got a website, it hasn't got the in front of it. It's just betterclinicianproject.com. And so it's a subscription service, no contracts, no commitment. So you can come and go as much as you please. And it's £12 a month.
Fantastic. Peter, do you want to leave us with anything?
Yeah, I've got two things, possibly three. So I heard something today, right? And it was because I know you get a lot of grief online and what have you. And it was basically, if you see someone's online persona, who they are online, all of that sort of stuff, it's impossible to judge them until you actually talk to the person, preferably in person, but like we're doing it here right now, albeit on Zoom and what have you. And I've got a different impression of you from this conversation than I have from seeing your Instagram. That's all I'm saying. Not whether it's good or bad or whatever. It's just, it is a different impression from actually having a conversation. So that's a good thing for people to think about. Is people like, you see a couple of videos on Instagram or a couple of pictures or whatever, and then you judge the person. It's impossible to do that. So that's number one. That's not even related to anything we've been talking about. Number two was the acupuncture thing. Reminded me of the Young Ones episode when Neil has a cold and he's sneezing all over the shop, and they haven't got any. You said you can do it with anything like toothpicks and that. And they haven't got any pins or anything, so they use 6-inch nails, don't they? But anyway, I don't recommend doing that. And then the third thing is, if we put this on ITV, like Beverly Hills Cop used to be years ago, it's going to be about 10 minutes long, because you'll have to cut out all the swearing. Anyway, there you go. Thanks for coming,
James.
No, just a really good conversation, Adam. Really, really nice to meet you. And I was going to kind of almost say what Pete said. I know on Instagram and things, you're very successful on there, and it has to be punchy, and it has to kind of, almost, have that persona, create a bit of that shock, a bit of, to get attention. But having this conversation with you has been actually really enlightening, really educating. And it's just been a really pleasurable hour and a bit. So thank you so much for coming on. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for saying that, guys. It's good to hear. And as you say, social media is a strange medium, and I agree. We can't take it at face value. You've always got to give people the opportunity of doubt. And as I always say to people, never suspect maliciousness or shithousery straight away. Often, it's just miscommunications and misunderstandings on both sides a lot of the time.
Fantastic.
Brilliant.
So great. Thanks, Adam. This was episode 116, Health Oddity. Please like and subscribe. Share this with your friends and join our Health Oddity group on Facebook. See you next week.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett, and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com, or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Odyssey.